Welcome to Change Starts With You, Self-Care and Self-Esteem with me, Zoe Aston, and Fora. I'm really excited to be collaborating with Fora because they offer a really unique opportunity, flexible working spaces that are kind of designed around inspiration and motivation. And they have, in case you don't know anything about them, they have a number of locations, I think 11, Spitalfields, Cambridge, Reading, Soho, Borough. So yeah, go check them out if you happen to not know much about Fora as a company. My name is Zoe Aston. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. I am a therapist, a mental health consultant, and the author of the book, Your Mental Health Workout. And my thing is that I talk about mental health using the metaphor of a physical workout. So I created and developed something known as Your Mental Health Workout, which is basically an Instagram program, a sort of free program that people can get hold of that allows them to program their mental health workout just like they would focus on a physical workout. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the very basics of mental health, your mental health workout. Ultimately, I'm going to talk to you about how to work on your mind in a way that contributes to wider change in society. I'm going to talk for about 25, sometimes 30 minutes. I tend to talk quite a lot, but I really love taking questions from people to make this as personalized an experience as possible. So if you have questions along the way, write them down. I think you can submit them. We've got Doug behind the scenes who's working to make sure the tech works well. And I will come to them about halfway through the session, and we can open up the sort of discussion then. So first things first, I need to share my screen with you. So let's do that. Just going to fix that. Share that. And there we go. So I am going to start by talking to you about kind of the basics of mental health. And when I talk about mental health, I prefer to break it down into the things that we can see, because the main thing that we struggle with around mental health is that we can't see it in the same way that we see physical health. So when you go to the gym or you work on your body or you change your food, you get to see kind of active results, and we can't see that with our mental health. And in fact, lots of the one second. Sorry, I was just checking the chat. Lots of the things that happen around mental health is that we are frightened of it, and the pandemic actually replicated that for us. So there was something going on that we couldn't see and we were scared of it. So this is a really good time to be focusing on what are the main pillars of your mental health. Now, I don't do the neuroscience thing, and I try to stay away from any kind of heavy therapeutic or psychological words. I break down mental health into thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Sorry about that. Slight technical issue. I break your mental health down into thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Now, with the mental health workout metaphor, I think about your thoughts as your mental health workout equipment. So there are lots of different types of thoughts. There are long-term thoughts, short-term thoughts, intrusive thoughts, narrative thoughts, destructive thoughts, helpful thoughts, motivating thoughts, affirmative thoughts, grateful thoughts. But ultimately, these are things that you can pick up and put down, a bit like weights or gym equipment. That's why the little brain in the corner is doing his weighted workout. Now, your feelings are a really important part of your mental health. They are your mental health muscle. Working on your feelings actually increases your resilience. It increases your strength. It increases your range of motion, or rather a range of emotion, as I like to call it. And if you don't know how to really work with your thoughts and your feelings, what tends to happen is that your behavior, which is your mental health results, starts to fall out of line with where you want it to be. It becomes misaligned with how you see yourself, and you end up kind of doing things that maybe you appear anxious, or you appear low, or you start acting out on a particular addiction of some kind. And all of those things are what I call mental health compensations. So the most important part of working on your mental health is working on your self-esteem, which is the core stability to your mental health. And those of you who work out physically will know that if your core stability is out of shape, everything else feels a little bit more difficult. Now, I call it the core stability to your mental health because over the years of experience that I've had as a therapist, as a consultant, everything comes back to how we feel about ourselves. And I want to start to eradicate this idea that there is high and low or good or bad self-esteem. I just talk about what shape your self-esteem is in. Sometimes I refer to it as strong self-esteem, but I generally refer to it as if your self-esteem is out of shape or if your self-esteem is in the shape you want it to be. And that is because self-esteem is about feeling equal. It is not about feeling better than other people. We all understand the kind of, we don't feel so good about ourselves when we feel less than. We kind of recognize that, oh, my self-esteem isn't good because I feel less than this person. I don't feel as talented, as clever, as attractive, as wealthy as that person. But we fail to notice that actually it's the going upwards, it's the better than, that are just as serious self-esteem wobbles as the less than place. In fact, I would argue that lots of people who go into that better than place are feeling so less than that they have to spring into that better than place in order to cope and feel okay with the world. But that's not self-esteem. Self-esteem is about feeling equal. It is about knowing that you are worth. Your worth is exactly the same as everyone else on the planet. You are as worthy as the next person and the person after that and the person after that. If your core stability is out of shape, if you don't feel equal to other people, what tends to happen is a bit like if it was body stuff, the other muscles, in inverted commas muscles, because your brain, just to caveat it, your brain is not actually a muscle, it's an organ, but for the sake of the metaphor, we're going to talk about it as a muscle. The other parts of the muscle in your mind start to kind of pull you in different directions. And it's these kinds of things that really highlight inequality. The compensations that we see in terms of mental health, in terms of having a self-esteem that is not quite where you want it to be, your core stability not being quite where you want it to be, are things like stress. I've got these little brains diagramming what self-esteem wobbles look like for us in the corner. So things like stress. So stress as a compensation to having your core stability out of shape or your self-esteem out of shape is something that we all experience at some point. We all have different tolerance levels for stress, but what it means is that there is an imbalance in your mind and your body, and your nervous system has been out of off balance for a really long time. Now, some people perform really well under stress, some people perform worse under stress. It's roughly 15%. So some people perform 15% better under stress, and some people perform 15% worse under stress. So you have to know how to handle your stress levels in relationship to how you feel about yourself or what you know about yourself. And when we don't know how to do that, when we don't know ourselves, when we don't know how we feel about ourselves, we tend to sort of overextend ourselves and end up in a stress response. The next compensation that can happen is anxiety, really rife at the moment. One of the things that happened in the pandemic is that we were given a huge self-esteem wake-up call, and lots of us didn't really know how to handle it. The things that we would usually use to make ourselves feel good enough about ourselves were taken away, and I'm going to come on to that a little bit later. But we were forced to work on how we felt about ourselves, and some of us found that intolerable, and we ended up feeling super anxious. Now, anxiety is actually when your mind and your body have taken in too much information and they don't know how to handle what's happened. Anxiety is the physiological response in your body. I encourage people, when they say that they're anxious, to really break it down and look at what that means for them, because when people come into my consulting room, for example, and say, I've got anxiety, I always say, well, that doesn't tell me anything about how you are, other than you're not really feeling like yourself at the moment. So if you identify with anxiety as one of your main compensatory behaviors or results, really ask yourself, what does that mean for you? Because everyone's anxiety is slightly different. The other compensation that we can experience is depression. Now, depression happens usually because we repress emotion. If we are having uncomfortable feelings about ourselves, if we are feeling more than or less than other people, we usually have an experience of having to shut down some of the sort of less desirable experiences in life. And we try to shut those out. We try to kind of ignite our denial system in order to feel okay. But when we do that, we have to shut out everything else. And that usually results at some point in a shutdown experience that we call depression. Everyone has a low mood from time to time, just to caveat that. It's very normal. If your low mood is affecting you more than half the time, it's affecting your personal life or your work life more than half the time, you may well find that you have something that you might call depression. Addictions, they are a huge compensatory action if our self-esteem is out of shape, because they create intensity outside of us. Rather than us having to look inside of us. So whether it's drugs, alcohol, work, exercise, gambling, shopping, anything that kind of changes how you feel, what it does is it takes your focus off yourself, and it means that you are focused on that thing rather than asking yourself, okay, what's going on inside me that is creating an experience that I can't stay with right now. And they're very closely related to addictions. We have disorders, things like eating disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, mood disorders, seasonal affective disorder. They're kind of imbalances, sort of chemical imbalances. Speaking of chemical imbalances, I'm not going to talk much about genetics in this, but there is always a genetic contribution to some of these compensations. You will gravitate towards the one that is most complementary to your genetic disposition. So lots of people ask me when I get to this point, yeah, I experience all of those things, but what does it actually look like to have strong self-esteem or self-esteem in good shape? So strong self-esteem means you feel aligned with yourself, aligned with the world. It means that how you behave and how you act and how you feel about yourself are aligned with each other. It means you feel balanced. It means you have a sense of calm within your moods. It means you're able to find balance. You know where your center is. It means that you feel equal, not better than, not less than, not more than, not worse than. You don't measure yourself. You don't measure your worth against what other people's outsides look like or what you see on social media. You have a fundamental understanding that your worth as a human being is equal to the next person. And you feel worthy, which links on to the equal thing. You feel worthy of time, attention, care. You feel worthy of your successes. You take responsibility for your failures. Now, I've used these 4 words to describe the experience of having your self-esteem in really good shape for a while. And when Fora came to me and asked me for something that would help people understand how to work with what they've got in terms of creating wider change, I thought, well, yeah, these are exactly the qualities that we want to see in society, in community. The thing is, and I see this a lot when I go into businesses or brands or teams, that if the people at the top of the food chain are not working on these things, are not working on their own self-esteem, they pass down the misalignment, the unbalanced, the unequal, and the unworthy. And everyone further down the food chain picks up on those things, and we create a system that is systemically run by the opposite of these 4 characteristics. So whenever I'm working with people on self-esteem, these are the things that I am looking for. So the next question, of course, is how do you create self-esteem and how do you keep it? And this is the information that I think is missing. If you are working on you because you want to create change within yourself that is going to filter through to other people, you have to know what it actually looks like. And this is where my approach to mental health slightly differs from other people, in that I am going to give you your mental health workout steps so that you have something to go away with and work with. What I would say is that this is not a one-time thing. This is something that you have to be aware of each and every day of your life. You have to actively work on it, just like your body. If you don't use it, you lose it. And self-esteem, your core stability, your mental health is exactly the same. So to create strong self-esteem, to work on getting your core stability into good shape, we start with stabilizing movements. Now, stabilizing movements, and then we move on to stabilizing thoughts. And I've used stabilizing because if your core stability is in good shape, it literally keeps you stable. It means that any kind of knocks or setbacks or perceived failures or mistakes that you make actually just kind of knock you off your stability, but you're able to kind of come back because you have a fundamental you understand what it means to be in your center, in your stability. So stabilizing movements are the things that you do, the actions that you take that give you the message that you are those 4 qualities: aligned, balanced, equal, and worthy. Now, when you take actions like that, you do it for yourself mainly. And actually, I'm going to push that a little bit more. The most important thing is that you are doing it for yourself. Other people will benefit. We have long lived in a society where we try to help other people in order to make ourselves feel good enough about ourselves. And when the other people don't do what we want them to do, our self-esteem takes a tumble, our self-worth takes a tumble. So you have to be the top of your priority list if you want to create stability and equality and balance and alignment and a sense of worth in your community, in your workplace, in your family, wherever it might be. So they're sort of like your self-care actions, which we're going to move on to a little bit later on. But these are things like, these are the things that look after yourself. So if you go to therapy, if you go to the gym, if you have a good sleep routine, if you feed yourself well, these are things about looking after your finances. These are the things that give you the message that you care enough about yourself to look after yourself in that way. If you have trouble with those actions, it's really likely that your self-esteem or your core stability has kind of got, I suppose, what I call a sort of an early days injury. If you find it very difficult to activate those movements, activate those actions, it's likely that there is some kind of shame-based belief system that is running the show, which is why the other part of the workout is about stabilizing thoughts. Now, they come in 2 forms. So stabilizing thoughts are thoughts that soothe you. So they are your self-soothing mechanism. That what I mean by that is that they are the thoughts that bring you kind of back online when you have a freak out or you have a trauma reaction, or something's going on that is taking you out of the present situation. There are lots of ways to self-soothe. The most fundamental one is to use your sort of physical data. So that's your senses, your nose, your taste, your sight, your touch. Lots of us do things like fiddle with our hair or scratch our heads or stroke our knees or fiddle with our fingers. And what we're doing is we're self-soothing ourselves. So we're trying to sort of unconsciously or maybe consciously bring ourselves kind of back online. That's the first part of it. So you're going to think about self-soothing and how to calm your nervous system down, get you back to center. The second type of stabilizing thoughts are the thoughts that motivate you. So these are your affirmations, your gratitudes. These are the sort of cheerleading thoughts, the go-getting thoughts, that you can do it, all that kind of stuff. Now, the reason I've kind of put those arrows there is because depending on your personality type, depending on who you are, where you come from, whether you're more introverted or extroverted, or you switch between the two, you may have to do the movements first and the thoughts follow, or you may have to do the thoughts first and then the movements will follow. It's up to you to kind of figure out what is going to work for you in that department. Nothing is, I wish we were all kind of like stencils of each other and I could say this is exactly what you need to do in order to get this result. But it's your job to experiment with it and find what works for you. And when you find what works for you, you stick with it and you are consistent with it. Like any other muscle, if you work on it, you will get the results that you want eventually. But so many of us kind of think, oh yeah, this is a really cool thing. I'll do it for a bit and then it kind of gets boring and you start forgetting about it. But a bit like, you know, I've heard a yoga teacher say in the past, you know, the pose starts when it starts to feel difficult. Your mental health stuff is exactly the same. It's when it's not novel and it's when it is a little bit boring and you're a bit fed up about things that you really need to be activating your stabilizing movements and your stabilizing thoughts. Because the next time you have a situation where someone treats you in an unworthy way or treats you in an unequal way or takes you off balance in your day-to-day life, if you've got this working for you, it's much easier to access. If you're only doing it every now and again, what tends to happen is when we have those experiences where we feel unworthy or less than or unequal, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to put in place to help ourselves with it. So the next part of the workout is, of course, looking at what those self-care, those movements actually are. And this is what really interests me at the moment, because self-care has changed over the course of the pandemic. At the beginning of the pandemic, when everything shut down, we all kind of had a bit of a sort of feeling emotion. We had a feeling experience, an emotional experience, and the things that we would normally do to soothe those feelings. Some of those will have been classed as addiction. Some of those would just be vices or things that you do every day to kind of make yourself feel better. Go to the gym, go shopping, see your friends. They were taken away. And I actually saw that as a really positive thing, because what it did is it forced us to consider what internal self-care looks like. And that is where we find equality. So yes, the pandemic highlighted differences and equality, because those who were more privileged, I'd be silly if I didn't say it, but those who were more privileged had more choices. But what it really showed us is that actually the work is on the inside. It is not on how good you look. It is not on the nice things that you have. It is not about having the best haircut or having the best pair of shoes. That is not self-care. That is a compensation for not knowing how you feel about yourself, or having a self-esteem crisis. So hopefully when we go back into our new normal, and this is just a sort of maybe an idealistic hope, but I'm thinking that people will be able to have learned from not having the industries that rely on us to use privilege, beauty, money, and all the other things that kind of come with any type of privilege that you've got. Let me start that again. So I'm hoping that as we come out of the pandemic, self-care will have changed, and we will have a much more of an idea of what internal self-care looks like. And that's because lots of the industries that rely on our consumerism for self-care have been closed. You haven't been able to go to the gym, go to the shops, go to the theatre. You haven't been able to use your money. You haven't been able to use your beauty or your necessarily your intelligence or your wealth to look like you are looking after yourself. And I would like to stress that those things, if you have those privileges in life, self-care feels easier. It feels like it's an easier thing to do. But what often happens, and I have worked with a wide range of people over the years, but what often happens is that because you have access to those things, you never do the deeper work that really makes you look at what is going on the inside. You actually get stuck in exactly what those industries want you to get stuck in. Because you are continuously going back to something outside of yourself to change how you feel, to make yourself feel good enough. And you are actually giving yourself the message that there is something that is not right with you, or there is something wrong with you, because you need to go back to these things and have more of them and change them and find different things to make you feel good outside of yourself. I hope that made sense. If you stick with external self-care, and there are lots of different types of self-care, but if you stick with external self-care because it is easier, you are actually contributing to the imbalance both inside of yourself and outside of yourself. So I'm not going to give you a list of things that make you feel nice or things that you can do to look after yourself. I'm going to ask you to think really deeply about what internal self-care actually looks like for you. The main hint that I can give you, or the main tool that I can give you to help you with this, is the idea that actually self-care is not about the actions that you take, it is about the feelings that come up. And on this slide, you'll see a range of emotions. Not all of them are positive. We tend to favor the positive, or inverted commas, positive, desirable emotions, and we tend to want to shut off from the undesirable emotions. But actually, it is about having a full range of motion, a full experience of feelings that you to fuel your mental health. You have to experience the fear to experience the gratitude. You have to experience the shame in order to experience compassion. You have to have experienced loneliness to know what it feels like to be connected and happy around other people. And it is the feelings that fuel that. And I think this is quite a tricky thing for us to get our heads around, because we are so used to basing the outcome of our self-esteem and our self-care on the action. And that is not where the nourishment is. The nourishment is in your feelings. It is in how you feel about yourself. So to help you along with this, to help you kind of start thinking about it, I wanted to just put some questions out for you guys. I'll talk you through them, and then I'm going to go quiet for about 3 to 4 minutes, so that you can have a think about them. You can brain dump them now, or you can screenshot it or write them down or whatever and come back to it later. You can answer these questions again and again and again and again to help you with finding balance and equality within yourself. The first one is, how do you define self-care? So one of the things that I haven't talked about yet is the fact that because of the rise of social media, lots of us tend to copy what other people are doing in their self-care routines. And then we wonder why it doesn't work. We look at someone who goes to the gym 5 days a week and they seem to feel great about themselves. So I start going to the gym 5 days a week, but I feel like it's punishment and I start to feel worse about myself. Different definitions of self-care. So decide what your definition of self-care is. The second one is, why do you practice it? So why? Is it that you are trying to work through something specific? Is it that you are working towards having stronger self-esteem or better boundaries? Is there something that you're specifically wanting to get to with self-care? What is your why? 3, what does self-care achieve for you when you do it? So what do you actually get out of it? And I always push people to be really honest with this, because if you've been trying self-care here and there or copying other people in terms of the self-care actions, the likelihood is that it's not actually, you haven't achieved anything positive. You've kind of maybe got bored with it, or you've decided that actually, there's something fundamentally wrong with you and therefore self-care doesn't work for you. So be really honest about right now, what is self-care achieving for you when you do it? And 4, what do you want to get out of your self-care practice? So what is your vision around your self-care? The self-care movement has almost given self-care a kind of cliche feeling to it. But I want you to think about the vision that you have for your self-care. So is it that working on your equality, working on your balance, working on your self-esteem is going to contribute to wider change? Maybe that's your vision. So maybe your self-care practices, although they have you at the top of your priority list, your vision is that you are going to be able to pay that forward. Maybe it's just that you're going to feel a bit better of yourself, better about yourself by the end of the week. I'm just going to go quiet for a few minutes while you guys take those questions down. I'm not going to give you too long. What I would say is, remember to check in with how you're feeling, because remember, feelings are what fuel the workout. Feelings are what fuel your mental health. And with that, I will zip my lip and give you 3 minutes from now. Just 1 more minute. So just to finish up on the self-care topic, these are questions that you can come back to again and again and again. If you're doing your core stability mental health workouts and you're trying to work on a self-care practice, self-care kit, self-care routine, whatever you want to call it, that really is going to work for you at your core, and there's something that you feel is a bit off, come back to these questions, whether it's to do with external self-care or internal self-care, whether it's to do with spiritual self-care, physical, mental, any type of self-care. Come back to these questions and make them really specific to things, really specific to the thing that you are working with at that time. And just to finish you off, I have lost my mouse. Oh dear. There we go. Having followed those 4 questions, this is how I see self-care being mobilized within us in a helpful way. Like I said, I'm not big on giving people lists of things that make them feel good. What I want you to do is do the maths, do the work that is going to help you. And this is the setup for mobilizing your self-care practice. So pick a self-care action that maybe you've worked on. Maybe it's an external one, maybe it's an internal one, maybe it's using helpful self-talk, or maybe it's having a bath. Think about what your motivation is behind that. Is it about you? Is it about impressing someone else? Is it about something totally unrelated to what's going on? Is it about escaping your feelings? Is it about getting in touch with your feelings? What is your motivation behind that particular self-care action? I'm really big on things like, so I really like baths, but the bath is what creates the space for me to do the internal work. So the motivation of me having a nice long bath is that my nervous system gets to reset, I calm down, I feel a bit better, and then I can have the space to do the work on myself on the inside. Number 2 is, how are you going to execute it? So what is your execution plan? Lots of people have nice ideas about things, but unless we actually think about how we're going to put them into action, about what you're going to do about that, how you're going to make it work, we tend to sort of feel a bit unmotivated about it, and we can't quite figure it out, and we're like, yeah, I have all these great ideas, but I feel really blocked about putting them into action. Come up with an execution plan. So for example, if your self-care action for today is going for a walk around the block after this session, very simply, the execution of that is that you're going to put your shoes on and you're going to take a walk around the block. It can be really basic. Don't overcomplicate these things. I've learned that lesson over and over and over again. Just keep it simple. The sum of your motivation, so why you're doing it, and your execution, your plan, has to make you feel hopeful. Now, I can talk about hope until I'm blue in the face. It's a really interesting topic. Just to give you a little taster, hope is not an expectation. Hope is that you are feeling light about something. It's a kind of light experience that allows you to feel resilient and allows you to continue with what you're doing, even when things are really difficult, without attaching to the outcome. Expectations are attached to the outcome. Hope is not. If you can hope for things without attaching to the outcome, you're in a really good place. And if the motivation and the execution behind your self-care routine makes you feel hopeful, then you're in absolutely the right place. If when you look at that, you feel hopeless and you feel demotivated, and it's not something that brings you that kind of light feeling, then that particular self-care action that you're working on isn't something that's going to bring you into those that experience of being aligned, balanced, equal, and worthy. So just pop it aside. Don't judge yourself. It might work for someone else. It's just not working for you right now, and that's absolutely fine. So just before we move on to the Q&A, I know I've done a lot of talking. I just want to read you this passage from a book that I've got coming out in May. This is from the Self-Care chapter. You guys can read it there. I, in fact, can't see the whole thing because of my face is in the way. So we say a solid internal self-care practice can nourish you from the inside far more than a weekend at a spa or a new pair of shoes will do. Internal self-care balances out the inequalities and imbalances between humans because it understands that we are all fundamentally equal and that looking after ourselves is a right. When you come from a place of privilege, it can sometimes feel easier to stick with external self-care as you have the resources to do so. But please know that by doing that, you opt to have far less responsibility for the internal and more unconscious feelings, thoughts, and behaviors that can often contribute to the inequality in society. Also, exclusively using any kind of privilege or wealth to fix things, be it situations, people, or indeed your own mental health, gives you the message that nothing works for you in the long run, and there must be something wrong with you as you constantly need these short-term fixes. You never create and internalize a self-care practice that works for you. That's just a short passage that kind of ties in everything that I've been trying to talk about and kind of leaves you with the message that I want you to hear, that change starts with you. It starts on the inside. If we want to create systemic change in life, we have to do the micro work. We have to be looking inside, because otherwise you are out of alignment with who you are and what you're doing. These are my books you can get a hand on. So the ebook, which is on your right-hand side, I believe, is the first aid kits. That's got loads of little mental health workouts in it. It's really simple. It's kind of pandemic focused, but also you can use it in any mental health emergencies. And your mental health workout, the full paperback, is due out in May. I would really recommend it, obviously. You can pre-order it now if you'd like. And on that, I will move on to the Q&A. So I am going to just shrink my screen there and invite you guys, stop the sharing, invite you guys to give me your questions. And Doug, please do prompt me if I am doing something wrong, but let's just see what's come up. Okay, so I can see here we've got one that says, how do you deal with a total lack of motivation to do anything, never mind self-care? Okay, so motivation at the moment is a really, really difficult thing. And sometimes we have to sort of activate to motivate. So sometimes, and lots of people don't necessarily like the phrase, but sometimes it really is about faking it to make it. Your brain doesn't know the difference between you doing something, or you imagining yourself doing something and you actually doing something. So if you want to create motivation, what I'd suggest is you use visuals or visualizations to imagine yourself doing something, and use those self-care bits and pieces that I was just giving you to create the sort of chemicals in your mind that are going to help you kind of get up and go. We have a bit of an issue with willpower in our society, in that we believe that lots of things can be done via willpower, but we all have a limited amount of motivation and willpower, and the pandemic in particular has highlighted that even more, because our brains are hardwired for learning and growth, and we haven't had the nourishment, the nutrients that our minds need in order to fulfill the level of motivation that we need to kind of go about our days. So in the first place, I'd say be really nice to yourself about it. And secondly, use ideas of doing things before you actually start doing them. Fake it to make it. Fake your brain into trick your brain into thinking that you are doing it. You know, we constantly trick ourselves into anxiety and fear because we think ahead, but you can actually use that mechanism in a positive way to help you get motivated. Got another question here. If you're feeling low, demotivated, but you've already done your self-care routine, should you press on with the activity work or re-engage with more self-care until you feel better? So self-care, okay, so self-care and all this mental health stuff actually isn't about you feeling better, although it will do that. It will help you to feel better. It is about acknowledging what's going on and working with what's going on. So one of the main tips that I give to people, just something really simple that you can do on a day-to-day basis, when you get up in the morning, check in with yourself, ask yourself, how am I feeling? Not how do I want to feel or how do I want today to go? How am I feeling and how am I going to work with that? Because so much of our detachment from ourselves and so much of those mental health compensations, the anxiety, the depression, the addictions, happen because we are ignoring parts of ourselves. And you know, I'm a therapist, so I have a sort of therapeutic view on it, but I often think of people as being kind of, there's lots of parts that make a whole. And if you are ignoring the demotivated part of you, or the low or demoralized part of you, and trying to just focus on the part of you that is active and, you know, get up and go, and, you know, trying to sort of pretend to be happy about it or grateful about it, what happens is the bit that you're ignoring gets more and more powerful. It's like having a kid like tug on your trousers. You know, if you don't pay attention, it's going to keep tugging at you. So as much as it might feel like you will feel worse doing it, because as I was saying earlier, it's kind of an undesirable emotion, turn around, I mean, metaphorically, turn around and look at the feeling that you're having and ask yourself, what is it telling you? Because it's when we tune into our feelings that we understand the truth of what needs to happen next. It might be that you're having a day where your self-esteem is a bit out of shape, and therefore you need to kind of put the self-esteem workout into place. It might be that actually, you know, you're really fed up of sitting in the house all day because you've been working from home for a year, and therefore you need to kind of make a commitment to getting out early in the morning, or something practical like that. But until you face the feeling of being low and demoralized, you can continue to do self-care actions that you think are going to make you feel better, but you're not necessarily going to have a positive reaction. One other thing I'd add to that is that sometimes when we start doing good things for ourselves, if we've got a shame-based experience or a history of trauma or anything like that, we can sometimes have a negative reaction to doing nice things for ourselves, and that is really, really normal. So if you hear your self-talk getting a sort of your negative self-talk heightening as you do self-care, as you try to change things, as you try to create equality, just know that that is something that you can actively bring into your mental health workout or your mental health routine, and work with it rather than against it. Let's see. Recommend any books or websites to explore in addition to the information I've already provided. You can check out, I've got a website, it's yourmentalhealthworkout.com. There's not a huge amount of info on there, but there's enough to kind of keep you going on a weekly basis if you want to put stuff into action. The Mind, the charity, have a great website with lots of information. I personally love Psychology Today. If I ever want to swat up on research or anything like that, that's the place that I'll go. And at the back of the ebook, which you can get now, there's a full list of websites and further reading resources, which I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but they are all written down there. I'm also really happy to recommend things via email. It's very easy at zoe@zoeaston.com. So if you've got specific questions, just pop them over and I will happily give you some names and places to go to. Let's see, how are we doing for time? I'm going to take a couple more questions. But this is what concerns you have over social media usage and the impact of our self-esteem. The right thing. Impact of our self-esteem and any positive side to it. So, I mean, I have lots to say about social media. The thing is that we tend to gravitate towards corners of social media that reaffirm what we already believe. So I encourage people to really curate their social media experience to prop up their self-esteem rather than to bring it down. The trouble with it is that usually we open our phones or we go onto our phones because we're bored or we're not feeling so good and we kind of want to get rid of that feeling. And the trouble with social media, if you haven't curated your feed to exactly something that works for you, is that you're at the mercy of what other people happen to be posting in that moment. So I would almost challenge the picking up of social media in order to make yourself feel better, like by creating times in your day where you check social media. But also, you know, we detox everything else in our lives, so detox your social media feed every couple of months. Make sure that it is full of stuff that actually affirms and reaffirms over and over again the positive side of mental health and the things that are actually helpful to you. I'm a big one for limiting news exposure. You know, we have enough information coming at us on a day-to-day basis that if you can kind of limit some of your news exposure, particularly if you're a media user, I think that's also really helpful. Let's see. just do these two. I'm quite good with my self-care and getting better with motivation, but how could you recommend stopping doing little things, habits that don't make you feel better? So stopping something is a skill. And once you figure out the best way for you to stop things, you can apply it anywhere. But the first time round, it tends to be a bit difficult because our brains have basically got two pathways. So we've got like the A path and the B path. And anyone who drives that autopilot thing where, you know, you'll be driving a journey and you kind of can't even remember that you've done that part of the journey. That's like the A road in your brain. And our brains are quite lazy. So we want to use as little energy as possible to get to where we want to be. And that's why we default to things that we already know about. So if you know that, say, for example, eating chocolate is going to make you feel better, and it does because it creates the chemicals that make you feel better, you're going to default to eating chocolate. Your challenge is to push yourself and challenge yourself. And it is hard work. You know, people sometimes say to me, yeah, but isn't therapy supposed to be nice and gentle? I'm like, no, you know, working on yourself, good therapy, good self-therapy is all about hard work. And the hard work is taking the B route and asking yourself the questions about what's going on, why are you reaching for this thing, why is it this thing, this habit that you have chosen to use to stick by. You might be someone who can reduce your exposure to the particular thing or the particular habits. I don't have the specifics, so it's a bit tricky to say. Or you might be someone who needs to take it out completely, be completely abstinent from that thing or that habit, that vice, and then reintroduce it in a healthier way. But see it as an opportunity. Don't see it as a punishment. If you look at these things as depriving yourself, what you're doing is pushing yourself into that less than place and feeling sorry for yourself and feeling less worthy than other people. I have to give up my main habit or my main vice because I'm not good enough for XYZ. No, see it as an opportunity. See it as a thing that you get to do. It's an experiment. It's an opportunity to get to know yourself. And I'll just take one last question, I think. Could you please provide tips on how to listen more to oneself and dig deeper into how one is feeling and not ignoring one's feelings? Even practicing self-care, I find it difficult in the current time to truly feel the feelings, name and express them, and not self-manipulating oneself. Okay, so to the person who said that, me too. Feelings are hard. Feelings are difficult. We like the idea of being connected to our feelings. We like the idea of being able to feel them and trust them and react on them and connect with them. But they can be difficult. It feels vulnerable, it feels exposing. The reason some of us have difficulty with it is because we mistake feeling for suffering. Now, when you are having your feelings, even if they are undesirable, even if they are horrible things like pain and shame and sadness and loneliness, they are part of what makes you up and part of what makes up you, rather, part of what makes up your reality. And it is a cathartic experience. We like the positive feelings. We want to feel happy. What we find really difficult is understanding that actually feelings are equal as well. You know, that shame that you feel when you think about XYZ, or the loneliness that you feel when you think about the next 4 weeks working from home, they are as important as feeling good and happy and content with life. Just making sure that I've answered that properly. Just time to feel the feelings. The other thing at the moment is that as I talked about in the slideshow, that at the moment we've got very little to take our attention off of our feelings. We've got very little to sort of make ourselves, in comparison to what we normally have, to make ourselves kind of feel better. But it is an opportunity to work on them. I can't make your feelings go away, but what I can say is that by working on your mental health, by working on all the things that we've talked about, you will know better how to manage your feelings and how to look after yourself when they happen. So on that, how much time do we have left? Time for one more. So someone asked, what does balance look like and how do we know we're not balanced? I would refer you back to those compensations. So if you're experiencing stress, anxiety, depression, addictions, disorders, and was there anything else in there? No, I think that's it. Those are the things that tell you that you're off balance. Some of us can sense it very early on. If you've done enough work on yourself, you'll know when you're off balance. But the main indication that you've been off balance for a while are those compensations that we talked about. And I think, see this one. Do you have advice on looking after your mental health when unemployed and feeling like you lack purpose? Yeah, so that's a really tough one at the moment, and you're not alone, is what I'd say. Human beings, we have to have purpose. If we lose purpose, we can feel, I mean, miserable would be an understatement. Our self-esteem takes a real hit. But what we learn from that is how much of your worth is dependent on having something to do. And what that means is that there might be some work to do on valuing yourself just for being, that actually you're okay and you have value, just because you are here, just because you are waking up in the morning, you have value. You fundamentally, I mean, we have to have jobs because that's the way the world works, but fundamentally you don't need a job or another person or stuff in your life to give you value. When you work on this stuff on the inside, you know that even without that kind of stuff, even without that sort of external validation, you have value as a human being. And I say that from kind of the bottom of my heart, because I know when I was working on this stuff, there was a moment, and this is why I say it's a feeling, not a sort of intellectual thing, but there was a moment where it kind of clicked into place. And I, for the first time in my life, believed that actually, if everything I loved, my family, my home, if all of that was to be taken away, if all of that was to be taken away, I knew that I would be okay. I had an innate sense of being okay in myself, even if I had nothing. Now, I say that from a position of never having nothing. I'm very aware of that, but it is something that clicks into place. It's an understanding that you're going to be able to cope. It is a really difficult time at the moment, and I think lots of people are experiencing a lack of purpose, a demoralization. I would suggest talking to people, connecting with people, telling people how you're feeling, and accepting the process. We have had a massive grieving process over the past year. We have lost so much, and acceptance is the end part of that process. But unfortunately, to get there, you have to go through depression and anger and bargaining and denial and all those things. So reach out, talk to people, know that it's normal, use your stabilizing thoughts, so those self-soothing thoughts and the thoughts that motivate you, and tell yourself that you use affirmations that you I'm losing my train of thought. Use affirmations that are going to help you get to where you want to be in terms of purpose, and they are things like my worth is not dependent on my job, etc. Okay, well, that brings us to time. Thank you very much for everyone for coming. I hope it was helpful. Like I say, I'm available on Instagram at, I haven't told you this yet actually, at Your Mental Health Workout, and my website is yourmentalhealthworkout.com. I'm very happy to answer questions via email. And I'll just say thanks for having me, Fora, and thanks for everyone for joining. Bye.